Hi, I'm Clara, and today's story will take you on a journey of betrayal and sweet revenge. The words felt rehearsed in my mouth, but the memory behind them was raw, like a bruise I kept touching. I grew up in a house that smelled like lemon cleaner and old books. My father was a quiet man with a laugh that came out like a surprise, sudden and warm. He remarried when I was 19, and the woman who moved in called herself my stepmother from day one. She wore silk scarves in summer and a smile that never reached her eyes. At family dinners, she sat like a judge, folding napkins with the same precision she used to fold people's lives into neat, disposable packages. At first, I tried to be kind. I brought her coffee. I asked about her childhood. I learned to laugh at the jokes she told twice. But kindness is a fragile thing when someone is determined to break you. She had a way of making compliments sound like verdicts. "You're sweet," she'd say, and the word would land like a verdict. Sweet, but useless. She loved to remind me of my place, not with shouts, but with small, surgical cuts. A rolled eye at my job. A comment about my clothes. A laugh when I mentioned college loans. The worst moment came on a rainy Thursday. My father had been sick for months, the kind of slow decline that rearranges a household. He passed away in the early morning, and the house felt like a stage after the actors left, empty, echoing. The funeral was a blur of black and polite hands. People said the right things. My stepmother wore a hat with a net and a face like a closed book. After the funeral, we gathered in the living room. There was a stack of envelopes on the coffee table, legal-looking, stamped, important. My stepmother sat at the head of the couch, the way she always sat at the head of conversations, and she picked up one envelope, turned it over, and said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "There's nothing for you." The words were a physical thing. They hit my chest like a fist. My mouth went dry. For a second, I couldn't breathe. The room blurred at the edges. My hands were cold. I remember the taste of metal in my mouth, the way my heart tried to climb out of my ribs. She didn't say it as a question. She said it like a sentence that closed a book. "There's nothing for you." The implication was clear. My father's life, his things, his memory. All of it belonged to her now. I felt smaller than I had in years. I felt invisible. People tried to console me. "It's just paperwork," my cousin said. "You'll get something." But her voice was thin. My stepmother smiled and tapped the envelope with a manicured nail. "We'll sort everything," she said. "There's nothing to worry about." That night I sat on the floor of my old bedroom and let the silence press against my ears. I replayed the funeral, the way she'd leaned in to whisper to my aunt, the way she'd touched my father's hand with a possessive gentleness. I thought about the years, the small kindnesses my father had given me, the late-night talks, the way he'd taught me to fix a leaky faucet. I thought about the way she'd erased me with a sentence. Anger came first, hot and immediate. It was a flare that made my hands shake. But anger alone is a poor architect. It burns bright and then leaves you in the dark. What settled in after was a slow, cold thing. Humiliation. I had been told, in front of family, that I was nothing. Not by a stranger. Not by fate. By the woman who had chosen to stand beside my father in his last years. I started to notice the little things that proved she'd been planning this. The way she'd been at my father's side during his doctor visits, the way she'd insisted on handling his mail, the way she'd been the one to sign forms. She had been building a narrative, that she was the responsible one, the one who cared, the one who deserved everything. And she'd done it quietly, with smiles and small gestures, until the day she could say those words and make them stick. I remember the physical sensations of that humiliation. My jaw clenched until my molars ached. My palms sweated. I felt a pressure behind my eyes, like someone had tightened a band around my head. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something. Instead, I sat very still and listened to the house breathe. That night I opened a drawer and found an old photograph of my father and me, taken when I was 8. He had his arm around my shoulders, and we were both laughing at something off camera. I traced his face with my finger. The paper was warm from my touch. I whispered. It didn't leave me nothing, like a promise to the photograph. The next morning, I went through the motions. I answered emails. I made coffee. I smiled at neighbors. But inside, a plan began to form. Not a plan born of blind rage, but one shaped by a steady, practical anger. If she wanted to erase me with words, I would respond with facts. If she wanted to claim everything, I would find the truth. I started small. Asked for copies of the will. She hesitated. Her smile faltered for a fraction of a second. "It's all with the lawyer," she said. "We'll get it sorted." But I could see the way she guarded the envelopes, the way she kept them close like a talisman. I asked the lawyer myself. He was polite but distant. "There are procedures," he said. "We'll notify all beneficiaries." Days turned into weeks. The house felt like a stage set where I was an extra. My stepmother moved through it with the ease of someone who believed she'd already won. She redecorated. She changed the curtains. She started to sign my father's name on things, as if ink could rewrite history. I watched her. I cataloged her habits. I learned the rhythm of her days. She drank tea at 3. She read the paper in the morning. She kept a small box of receipts in the top drawer of the desk. She was careful. She was meticulous. She thought she had time. And time, I learned, is a dangerous thing for people who assume victory. It gives you the chance to make mistakes. By the end of this section, the audience should feel the sting of betrayal, the humiliation Clara endured, and the slow, simmering resolve that replaces raw anger. The stage is set. A stepmother who believes she has erased Clara, and a protagonist who will not accept that verdict. The turning point came on a Tuesday, the kind of ordinary day that makes betrayals feel sharper. I was in the kitchen, rinsing a mug, when I heard the front door click. My stepmother's voice floated down the hall, bright and casual. "I'll be at the bank," she called. "Don't touch anything." Those words were a challenge. Don't touch anything. As if the house were a museum, and I was a visitor. I felt something in me snap, not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, resolute click. I set the mug down and walked to the desk where she kept her receipts. The drawer was locked. I found the key in a bowl of costume jewelry on the dresser. It was almost too easy. Inside the drawer was a small envelope, the kind you get from a bank. My name was on it. My hands trembled. I didn't open it. I put it in my pocket and walked out the back door like a woman carrying a secret. I sat in my car and breathed. The envelope was heavy with possibility. I thought about the lawyer's polite words, the way my stepmother had smiled at the funeral, the way she'd said, "There's nothing for you." I felt the old humiliation flare, then cool into something else. Determination. I didn't open the envelope in the car. I drove to a coffee shop and sat in the corner, the envelope on the table between my hands. I watched people move around me, a barista steaming milk, a student typing furiously, a couple arguing softly. The world went on. My life had been reduced to a single piece of paper. When I finally opened it, my breath caught. Inside was a bank statement and a small note from my father. "For Clara, keep your head up." The handwriting was unmistakable. My father had always written like he was carving words into wood, deliberate, strong. The statement showed a trust account with my name on it. Not a fortune, not a mansion, but enough to matter, enough to be a lifeline, enough to be proof that my father had not intended to leave me nothing. I felt a rush of warmth and grief at once. My father had left me something, quietly, in a way he knew I would find if I looked. But the existence of the account also meant someone had been hiding things. My stepmother had lied. She had said there was nothing. She had tried to erase me. That night I sat at the kitchen table and made a list. I wrote down everything I knew. The lawyer's name, the dates my stepmother had been at my father's side, the receipts in the drawer, the bank name on the statement. I wrote down the small injustices, the way she'd taken over the garden, the way she'd changed the locks. I wrote down the big one. She had said, in front of family, that there was nothing for me. The list was a map. It showed me where to go. I started with the bank. I called and asked to speak to someone about the trust. The woman on the phone was polite but firm. "We can't discuss account details without proper authorization," she said. I asked what authorization looked like. She told me the forms I needed. I filed them. I waited. While the bank processed paperwork, I dug deeper. I went through old emails, old bills, anything that might show my father's intentions. I found a draft of a letter my father had written to me 2 years earlier, never sent, where he talked about setting aside money for my education and a small emergency fund. He'd been careful. He'd been discreet. He'd been protecting me in the only way he knew how. I also started to talk to people, not to complain, to gather facts. I spoke to my father's old neighbor, who remembered seeing my stepmother at the house late at night with a stack of papers. I spoke to the gardener, who said my stepmother had insisted on changing the schedule and the plants. I spoke to the housekeeper, who mentioned a box of documents my stepmother had moved to the attic. Each conversation added a tile to the mosaic. The picture that emerged was not just of greed, but of a carefully constructed narrative. My stepmother as the devoted caregiver, my father as the frail man she rescued, and me as the inconvenient child. She had been rewriting the story for months. There were moments of doubt. I worried I was reading malice where there was only grief. I worried I was making a mountain out of a molehill. But every time I felt that doubt, I would touch the envelope in my drawer and remember the way she'd said, "There's nothing for you." That sentence had weight. It had intent. It deserved a response. I began to plan. Not a reckless, dramatic revenge. That's the kind that leaves you empty. I wanted something precise. Something that would expose the truth and restore what was mine. I wanted the satisfaction of fairness, not cruelty. Step 1. Secure the facts. I filed the bank forms and requested copies of the trust documents. I scheduled a meeting with the lawyer and asked for a full accounting. I made sure everything I did was legal, documented, and above reproach. If I was going to win, I would do it with evidence. Step 2. Gather witnesses. I asked the gardener and the housekeeper to write down what they'd seen. I recorded conversations where it was legal to do so. I kept a journal of dates and events. I printed emails. I made copies of receipts. I created a paper trail that would be hard to dismiss as sour grapes. Step 3. Prepare the reveal. I didn't want a courtroom. I wanted a moment that would strip away the performance my stepmother had been giving. I wanted the family present, the lawyer present, and the envelope, the one she thought she controlled, opened in front of everyone. There were practicalities. I had to be patient. The bank took time. The lawyer had his own schedule. My stepmother continued to move through the house like a queen in a small kingdom, unaware that the map of her reign was being redrawn. During those weeks, I practiced restraint. I smiled at her. I made small talk. I let her believe she had the upper hand. It was a strange kind of theater. I felt like an actor waiting for the cue. My body learned to hold tension in a new way, shoulders relaxed, voice steady, eyes soft. Inside, I was a coiled wire. There were nights I lay awake and rehearsed the moment of reveal. I imagined the sound of the envelope being slit open. I imagined the silence that would follow. I imagined her face when the truth landed. I imagined my own reaction, whether I would laugh, cry, or simply stand and watch. The plan was not about vengeance for its own sake. It was about justice. My father had been kind to me in ways that mattered. He had left me a thread of security. My stepmother had tried to cut that thread and claim the tapestry for herself. I wanted to restore what was rightfully mine and to show the family the truth. By the end of this section, the audience should feel the methodical shift from hurt to strategy. Clara is no longer a passive victim. She is a careful, determined protagonist building an airtight case. Tension should be high. The audience knows the reveal is coming, and every small detail adds to the anticipation. The day of the reveal arrived like a storm you can see on the horizon. I invited the family over under the pretense of sorting through my father's papers. I told my stepmother I wanted to go through the envelopes together. She agreed with a smile that was too bright. She thought she was in control. The living room filled with people, cousins, aunts, the lawyer, and my stepmother, who sat with her hands folded like a queen waiting for applause. I placed the envelope on the coffee table, where everyone could see it. My hands were steady.
My heart was a drum in my chest.
Before we start, I said, and my voice surprised me with its calm, I want to read something my father wrote. I unfolded a photocopy of a letter I'd found in his desk, a letter he'd never sent, but had kept. I read it aloud, and his words filled the room like a presence. Clara, if anything happens to me, please know I did what I could. I set aside a small trust for you. It's not much, but it's yours. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. There was a rustle. My stepmother's smile thinned. She cleared her throat. That's sweet, she said, but there was a tremor in her voice. I slid the bank statement across the table. This is the account, I said. It's in my name. I have the paperwork. The lawyer leaned forward. He took the statement, his face unreadable. He asked to see the trust documents. I handed him the copies I'd requested. He examined them, then looked up. Your father did set up a trust, he said. It names Clara as a beneficiary. The room shifted. My stepmother's face went pale, then red, then a color I couldn't name. The color of someone realizing their script had been rewritten. She stood up. That's impossible, she said. He told me. Her voice broke. She tried to gather herself. He told me everything would go to me. He promised. The lawyer's tone was gentle but firm. Mr. Thompson's signed documents are clear. There are also bank records showing transfers into the trust. He placed a folder on the table. Inside were copies of the forms, the bank statements, and a notarized note my father had left. The evidence was tidy. It was undeniable. My stepmother's hands trembled. She reached for the folder as if to snatch it away, but her fingers hovered. For the first time since she'd moved into the house, she looked small. The performance had slipped. Then she did something I hadn't expected. She laughed. It was a high, brittle sound. You think this proves anything? She said. You think you can come in here and accuse me? Her voice rose. She looked around the room, searching for allies. Some faces were blank. Some were shocked. A cousin whispered, I didn't know. I felt a strange compassion in that moment. Not for her, but for the way fear can make people ugly. She had built a life on a lie, and now the lie was collapsing. I could have let the lawyer handle it. I could have walked away and let the legal system do its work. But I wanted the moment to land in the place where she'd made the claim, in front of the family who had watched her erase me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small envelope I'd taken from her drawer weeks earlier. I set it on the table and slid it toward her. You said there was nothing for me, I said. You said it in front of everyone. You made it a performance. I kept this because I wanted you to see what you said. She stared at the envelope like it was a live thing. Her mouth opened and closed. Give it to me, she hissed. I didn't. I opened it instead. Inside was a receipt for a transfer, a deposit into the trust, and a note in my father's handwriting. For Clara, don't let anyone tell you otherwise. The room went quiet. The silence was a physical thing, heavy and full. My stepmother's face crumpled. She tried to speak, but the words came out thin. He told me. She began, then stopped. Her eyes filled with tears, but they were not the kind that cleansed. They were the kind that stained. The lawyer cleared his throat. There are also discrepancies in the estate accounting, he said. Some assets were moved without proper authorization. He looked at my stepmother. We'll need to investigate. Her reaction was immediate and furious. You can't do this, she said. I took care of him. I was there. Her voice had the edge of someone who believed that care entitles ownership. She looked at me with something like hatred. You're trying to ruin me. I felt a rush of something I hadn't expected. Pity. Not for her losses, but for the way she'd convinced herself that possession equals right. She had been so busy claiming the role of devoted partner that she'd forgotten the person she'd been before, the one who could have chosen kindness. The family murmured. Some people looked at me with new eyes. Others looked away. My father's neighbor, who had written a note about seeing my stepmother with papers, nodded at me. The gardener, who'd written down dates, stood up and said, I saw her move boxes to the attic. I thought it was odd. Small confirmations stacked like bricks. My stepmother's anger turned to bargaining. She offered to sign over things. She promised to make amends. But the damage was done. The truth had been revealed in a way that couldn't be unspoken. Her performance had been exposed. When the lawyer left to begin the formal investigation, the room felt different. The air had shifted. I felt a lightness I hadn't known I'd been carrying. It wasn't triumph in the way movies show it. No gloating, no vindictive dance. It was a quiet, steady relief. The humiliation that had sat on my chest like a stone had been lifted. After everyone left, my stepmother stayed behind. She sat on the couch and looked at me with a face that had been stripped of armor. "I didn't mean," she started, but the words were small. "You said, there's nothing for you." I said. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. The memory of that sentence had been the fuel for everything that followed. "You said it in front of everyone." She looked down at her hands.
"I was scared," she said.
"I thought I'd lose everything." Her voice was raw. For a moment, I saw a woman who had been afraid and had chosen greed over grace. I could have forgiven her. I could have offered a hand. But forgiveness is not a currency you spend to erase consequences. She had to face what she'd done. She had to answer for the choices she'd made. I left the house that evening with the envelope in my bag. I drove to the place my father and I used to go, a small park bench under a maple tree. I sat and opened the envelope again. The paper felt ordinary in my hands. I read my father's note and let the words sink in. "Keep your head up." I smiled. And for the first time in months, the smile felt like a bridge rather than a mask. The aftermath was not cinematic. There were legal meetings, paperwork, and awkward family gatherings. My stepmother moved out eventually. The lawyer found irregularities that required restitution. The trust was honored. I received what my father had intended. It wasn't a fortune.
It was a promise kept.
The real payoff, though, was quieter. It was the way my voice stopped shaking when I spoke about my father. It was the way I could look at my stepmother without feeling small. It was the knowledge that I had stood up for myself with dignity and evidence, not with a scream. In the weeks that followed, people came to me with their own stories of being dismissed, of being told they were nothing. They thanked me for not letting the lies stand. I realized then that my fight had been bigger than me. It was about the small, everyday injustices that people accept because they don't think they have the right to push back. Justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet, steady insistence that the truth be seen. My father left me more than money. He left me a reason to stand. If this story gave you chills, smash that like button and tell us in the comments, what's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And, of course, subscribe for more stories like this. I'm Clara. Thanks for listening.